Iarmidjart a hiarna dan an nefa corfuin an sin stúrin an niever agus neartha gras a runnerin an ní a hótse an críocha an is gur bhúlsa agus sófar an nid a bhríhir agus an lilik ní festa agus gur tríta críoch nófaríd trí Christ ardíirna. Direct we beseech thee, O Lord, our actions by thy holy inspirations, carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee, and by thee be happily ended, through Christ our Lord. Amen. I'll give question to the Minister for Social Protection. Priority question in the name of Deputy Willie O'D. The first one, just remind 6 minutes per question, 2 minutes for the Ministers. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Alaska Hirlock. In 2013, this year, my department will spend over $2.8 billion on supports for family and children, of which $1.9 billion will be on child benefit, $220 million on family income supplement, $694 million on child allowances for people on social welfare, called qualified child increases, and $49 million on the back-to-school clothing and footwear allowance. This amounts to a very significant part of the social protection budget, around 14% of the total. We need to be sure that this major investment delivers good outcomes. In line with commitments contained in the programme for government, I established the Advisory Group on Tax and Social Welfare in 2011. The Advisory Group brought together people with experience and expertise on the issues of how best the state should support families with children on social welfare payments and on low pay. I was pleased to publish the first report of the Advisory Group examining child and family income supports on the 20th of February. This report makes important high-level recommendations on how child benefit could be maintained as a universal payment, and I want to welcome this recommendation of maintaining a high level of universal payment by the Advisory Group. The group concluded that there is no one perfect method of targeting child and family income supports. There was a strong preference in the group for an approach based on a two-tier child and family income support payment. The group considered that this approach would allow for a rationalisation of the overall child income support system. The two-tier child income support payment would encourage work participation and allow for better flexibility in the targeting of support for different family types. I have to interrupt the Minister there. The rest of the reply will appear in the official. And so I just want to say that some members of the group found that taxation of child benefit an attractive reform option, but it was recognised that there were difficulties in relation to this, and because it's focused only on child benefit, it wouldn't contribute to a better overall design of the family and child income support system. Deputy Willie O'D.
I thank the Minister for her response. In the course of her response, and we've limited time here, the Minister told me that the Department will spend, she tells me how much the Department will spend on child income support. She was telling me the report has been published. She was telling me that a minority group on the committee favour taxation and the majority group favour a two-tier system. I know all that. What I actually asked the Minister was, has she any views herself on the actual recommendations in the report? In other words, is she for it? Is she against it? Is she prepared to recommend it as the way forward, albeit with some modifications? I mean, the Minister will recall that she was concerned, expressed a concern here on a number of occasions about an apparent reluctance on our side to look at the question of targeting benefits payable under the social welfare scheme. Now, this report actually provides for a method of targeting. Does the Minister support that?
Well, Minister.
I received the report roughly a year ago, and what I did on receiving the report was, first of all, to look at the poverty impact of the different recommendations in the report and to have those examined in some detail. And secondly, as we know, changes in big systems like social welfare, over 600,000 families getting child benefit for nearly 1.2 million children. to look at what would the changes in operations require and how long would they take. And the advice to me was that it would take at least 18 months. Now, I know that Fianna Fáil, before they left government, in the programme for the National Recovery Plan put forward by Fianna Fáil at the time, they talked again themselves about rebalancing and integrating child income support and having a universal component as well as a supplementary payment. And I'm sure Deputy O'Dea is familiar with his own party's work in government on the issue. What I am continuing to do is to await, at the moment, the group is doing work in relation to the interaction of tax and social welfare in relation to families with children, and that includes looking at the family income supplement payment. That report itself will be due sometime later this year, I understand, and taking the, if you like, suite of recommendations together to have a look and see, as I said, how we can better target. This year already, the Deputy will be familiar with the fact that in this year's budget, I got the agreement of government to start a pilot project in relation to 6,500 after-school childcare places, the first such development, and secondly, to fund from my department, but working through the Department of Children, an area-based approach to child poverty. So, in fact, we have already begun a significant programme of targeting, but as I've said before, I would like to see sufficiently more targeting. We have 22% of families which are jobless households, and the children in those jobless households have a higher at-risk of poverty rate than anybody else. So I think it's important that we have a very detailed national discussion on all of the different elements of this.
Look, I'm familiar with the NEST report which our government commissioned, and stats-based recommendations along somewhat similar lines. I appreciate that. But I mean, the Minister will be aware, when she talks about examining FIS, that FIS is part of the package here. I mean, the package here concerns FIS, it concerns qualified child increases, and it concerns child benefit. Now, in relation to the Minister's comment about early childcare, I accept what she says, but I have to point out to her, in relation to the poorest section of the community, that the provision she's made for that represents about 10% of what she's taking back by cuts in child benefit, which of course proportionately affect the poorest most. Now, can I say to the Minister, I mean, I take the point that this will take 18 months, possibly over 2 budgets, or maybe 2 budgets at least to implement. Now, if the government wants to implement it, if it wants to go in this direction, surely it should be planning now to start the implementation process in the next budget. I know what the Minister said when the report was initially published. She said that it would be referred to the Social Affairs, the Social Protection Committee, that we would discuss it, etc., and it may or may not come back to the Dáil. But I mean, if you're to start providing for this in the next budget, surely there has to be some timetable on this.
Thank you, Deputy.
So where are we in that?
I'll call the Minister's final reply on this question.
Well, we've already, Deputy, had quite a detailed and thoughtful debate in the Seanad in relation to the report, and as the Deputy correctly says, the report is going to be discussed in some detail when it's presented before the Education and Social Protection Committee. And I think it's very important that as many deputies as possible from all parties, and none in this House, should give serious consideration to the report. The Deputy does know that I can't actually indicate what budgetary decisions may be made at this time of the year. But what I am anxious to do is, first of all, to look at the impacts, particularly on people on low income in work, to look, for instance, and to take into consideration the fact that we have a lot of people in the 35 to 50 age group who are at work, have 2 or 3 children, but have heavily indebted mortgages. And we have to be aware, and I'm sure the Deputy is aware, that child benefit is a very important cash payment to such families, some of whom may have no social welfare income because of being previously self-employed. So I can't give you an indication of budget decisions now, except to say that we are looking very carefully at all of the different impacts of the report and how the changes suggested would be carried out and what time frame it would take to carry them out effectively.
And I call on the Minister. Number 81.
In 2013, the estimated expenditure on child benefit will be approximately 1.9 billion to around 609,000 families in respect of 1.16 million children. Child benefit is a monthly payment paid on a universal basis to families with children in respect of all qualified children up to the age of 16 years. And continuing to 18 for children in full-time education or who have a physical or other disability. Budget 2012, the child benefit rate for the first and second child was €140 per month. The monthly rate for the third child was reduced to €148, and for the fourth and each subsequent child to €160. Budget 2012 also provided for the discontinuance of the grant for multiple births, but continued the premium payments of 1.5 times the standard rate for twins and twice the standard rate for other multiple births. Budget 2013 made a further reduction in child benefit rates to €130 for the first, second and third child, while the rate for the fourth and subsequent children was set at €140. Budget 2013 also provides for child benefit rates to be standardised at €130 for all children from January 2014. It should be noted that despite recent reductions in the child benefit rates, the current rate compares favourably with rates, for example, in 2002, when they were €117.60, or 2005, €141.60 at the lowest rate. Notwithstanding these changes, our expenditure and payments on child benefit remain among the highest in Europe. Since becoming Minister for Social Protection, I've strongly defended the universality of child benefit because the state must value every child and support families. The fact that every family receives child benefit, regardless of their employment status, also ensures that in the current system there is not a disincentive to work.
Minister, the reason I asked the question, and it's probably quite clear from it, is that your own party made a promise to the electorate not to touch child benefit. But we understand how Minister Abbott views those type of election promises. That's fine. You can say what you like in elections by the looks of it. But your government also said that you would protect the most vulnerable in Irish society. Yet the figures you've just read out there in relation to cuts in both budgets, 2012 and 2013, show that you're not living up to your election promises, nor are you living up to the programme for government. So, Minister, can I ask you to give a commitment not to reduce further the child benefit in the forthcoming budget, and to set aside the Mangan report, which seems to be guiding, as you sat on it since last year, guiding your cuts that you had implemented in this year's budget. Do you not understand the increase in distress in working class families in particular, but all families across this state, because of the depth of the crisis, that child poverty is increasing, and that the cuts in child benefit, in fact, rather than being ring-fenced, as you have said, to help children, are in fact part of an overall budgetary cut and is compounding the distress of many families in our state?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Yeah, I think the important thing when the Deputy speaks about issues around poverty is that during the period from 2004 to 2010, which is the most recent data available for children, the poverty reduction effect of social transfers has risen continuously from 43% to 62%. And as far as I'm aware, although we don't have the detailed statistics yet, that has continued. Because, as I've said, say compared to the United Kingdom, our direct payments in cash to families with children, notwithstanding the severe economic difficulties in the country, of which I think the Deputy is aware, continue to be among the highest in Europe. And I think that that is a considerable tribute to taxpayers in Ireland who have funded and continue to fund very high level of payments to families with children, because I think there is a general recognition in Irish society that families with children should be recognised and should be supported. Has it been possible, Deputy, to avoid all reductions? Unfortunately not, because when this government was elected, our predecessors had already invited in the IMF, who had set in place a very stringent structure in relation to how the budget would be dealt with, and the condition of that was to lend us money so that we could in fact pay for social transfers like child benefit, so that we could pay public servant salaries, so that we could pay for health and education. It's a very difficult situation. It's one out of which at the moment we are emerging, but I'm a bit surprised that the Deputy has the luxury of being able to ignore the difficulties and the necessity to borrow on strict terms from creditors who have required certain cuts, and that the Deputy doesn't seem to be aware of that.
Supplementary briefly, please.
Brief supplementary. Sorry, it's not a luxury, and in fact we've been quite positive and progressive in how that aspect of finances would be addressed, and we have put forward proposals, just you have chosen to ignore it. Minister, do you not understand the contradiction in your position? Because you started back your second reply to state that there is a positive effect of social transfer, and in fact has increased. The very fact that you're cutting one of those social transfers gives a lie to what you are saying. You are now going to have a negative impact, but you've already said that it's a positive. Do you not understand the illogical position that you have adopted in this case, and that child benefit should be ring-fenced, and ensure that child poverty or child benefits should be ring-fenced and child poverty is addressed, not only through this mechanism but through other mechanisms, some of which you've come to of late?
Minister,
Well, you see, Deputy, the fact is, in relation to Ireland, and it's something I think that we should recognise as to Ireland's credit, that the fact that we pay such high levels of social welfare payments in this country means that this is the single greatest factor in reducing the at-risk of poverty levels. And unlike much better off European Union countries, where the average effect of social transfers to reducing poverty is about 40%, and that includes some very well-off countries, the actual reduction in the at-risk of poverty through social transfers in Ireland is about 60 to 62%, simply because of the very high levels. Now, if you're suggesting, as you seem to be suggesting, that the government had the luxury of ignoring the financial crisis that we inherited and not actually providing for producing a sustainable reform of the public finances, well then I have to say I think the position of your party is a little bit fantastical, because we require to borrow, and unfortunately still require to borrow, significant sums, and I don't know any economist who has been able to suggest a way of borrowing those sums and continuing to pay for health, education, social protection and all the other necessary public payments that the state makes and the public servants that it employs. And I have to say, I'm a bit taken aback at the kind of economic analysis that you've set forth here. We would basically, your unstated suggestion, in effect, is that somehow or other the country would default and that we would have difficulties that other countries have experienced. While it's been very difficult for a lot of people in Ireland, we are managing to bring the country back to a sustainable recovery path, which is why recently we've had the first growth in employment in this country since 2008. You know?
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Seamus Healy as the next priority question. Keshte Octado, 82. Call of the Minister.
In 2013, my department will spend an estimated $284 million on the household benefit scheme, providing 410,000 customers with a package worth almost €700 per year. And we will spend about 176 million of that in relation to ESB payments, and we will spend just under 19 million of that in relation to gas payments. So that's a total of 284. In addition, 410,000 customers received the fuel allowance of €20 per week, paid for 26 weeks. That's 6 months of the year, at a cost of 211 million. So as you can see, we are spending on fuel payments and weekly fuel payments for 6 months of the year. We're spending just on 500 million, which I'm sure the Deputy will agree is a very significant amount of money. Under the Supplementary Welfare Allowance Scheme, on exceptional needs payments, we also make special payments to people with a particular need. And we also have 3,000 customers who are currently in receipt of a special heating supplement paid to assist them with special heating needs, for example, because of ill health or infirmity. And the provision for exceptional needs payments this year is 47 million, with an additional 11.4 million for supplements. So all told, on heating, we are spending well over £500 million, Deputy. The change to the electricity and gas elements of the household benefits package in budget 2013 will bring significant savings, while aiming to enable customers to achieve better savings through greater mobility in terms of switching suppliers. The cost of the electricity and gas allowance has risen from 110 million in 2005 to an estimated outturn of 201 million in 2012. That's an increase of 83% over 7 years. And in the current economic climate, these increases were unsustainable.
I have to interrupt the Minister there also. The rest of the reply will appear in the official report. Deputy Healy.
The fuel poverty, there's significant fuel poverty in this country, and it particularly affects the elderly, the infirm and people with disabilities. And studies have shown that more than half of elderly people have cut back on food to try and ensure that they'll keep their homes warm. And about 60% of elderly people are worried as to whether they can heat their homes properly over the autumn and winter periods. There's significant cutbacks in the heating supplement paid by community welfare officers, almost to the point of abolition, really, in comparison to previous years. Today, every local authority in the country has been notified of savage cutbacks in the Housing for Older People grant scheme. That's a scheme that was used to insulate homes, to install windows and doors, and generally to keep homes warm. Now, I'd be suggesting to the Minister that in those circumstances, and without borrowing another cent, we can reverse the savage cuts to heating and fuel schemes over the last couple of budgets. Promissory notes, last Count Corla, the government tell us that they're saving $1 billion per year on the promissory notes deal. And we also have a situation where last week the Minister for Finance told me that the top 1% of income earners in this country earn €8.74 billion, an average of 404,000 each, or an after-tax figure of 249,000. No wealth tax, no assets tax. So I suggest to the Minister that she be well able to restore the cuts that she brought in on her last two budgets on the basis of those two issues.
Minister,
Thank you.
Well, first of all, just let me say, and I appreciate that Deputy Healy is talking to constituents who find, the price of electricity and fuel, which has risen enormously in recent years internationally, and that is reflected, therefore, in Irish prices as set by the regulator. But Ireland's older population has the lowest rate of consistent poverty, 1.9%, compared with the whole population rate of 6.9%. And as a group, compared to the rest of the population, is the group least likely to be in poverty, because for reasons I explained to Deputy O'Snuddick, our rate of social welfare payments to families with children, but also to our older citizens, is significantly in the higher end of the range across Europe. And we have been able to maintain that despite the economic difficulties visited on us by the promissory note arrangement that was entered into by the last government, which was tremendously costly for the state. And I have to say, I think it's greatly to our credit that we have been able to renegotiate this, as the Labour Party suggested when we were in opposition.
Thank you, Minister.
Just let me say, in relation to the changes, we are changing from a units-based to a cash credit arrangement now on a monthly basis. Some 40% of electricity customers, 20% of gas customers in Ireland have switched supplier, and as a consequence have got the benefit of various discounts. But when it comes to people who are on social welfare customers, only 16% have switched. Now, I think one of the things we would like to do is that where there are attractive offers which would reduce people's heating bills, that people should be enabled, if they wish, to take advantage of those offers. And the old system was not as flexible as the new system it will be.
Deputy Healy, briefly.
Minister, elderly people have been targeted with significant cutbacks, in fact savage cutbacks over the last number of budgets. The fact of the matter is that these various schemes, the heating units, the free fuel, the mobility allowance, the respite care grant, all these schemes, these are the little things that made life bearable for elderly people. Of course, they're the very things that Margaret Thatcher targeted when she came to power in England. And unfortunately now it appears that this government and the Minister's Department, and indeed the Minister herself, is following in the footsteps of Thatcher in reducing these little things that make life bearable for elderly people. And I would ask the Minister to have some compassion. She has the money, it's there from the provisory notes, it's there from high earners, she has the money. Please restore these benefits to elderly people.
Final reply, Minister.
Well, I have to say I have been determined and have succeeded in protecting the weekly pension payment. And for the elderly people that I know, that is the most important and significant part of their income. The second thing that people spoke to me a lot about, because people speak to me as well as to yourself, Deputy, was that elderly people particularly value concessions such as the free travel allowance. And again, although we have to make all our schemes as efficient as possible and as cost-effective as possible, nonetheless, these are very important benefits which our taxpayers contribute to, and are happy to see the fact that our elderly people have one of the highest levels of payments in Europe, and therefore in Ireland the lowest risk of poverty. And just let me say to you that in keeping the weekly social welfare payment of the pension and the retirement payments intact, that I think is something that in all the submissions that were made to me was emphasised. Secondly, though, can I say, in view of the over 500 million that we're spending in relation to heating, what I would like to see is that we would actually have a stronger system for insulating and retrofitting homes. And my colleague, the Minister for Communications, is he's working on that at the moment, and fairly ambitious targets are being set. We know that construction-related work has become cheaper, and the key thing there is to retrofit, is to use the money to retrofit homes, so that we avoid a situation where, as you know, and I know, in some cases smoke is going up the chimney and it's not heating the house, it's heating the air above the house.
Okay, next question in the name of Deputy Willie O'Dea, number 83, Minister. I call on the Minister.
The number of one-family parent recipients stood at 87,824 in January of 2013 of this year. The cost of the one-parent family scheme was 1.06 billion in 2012, and it's estimated to be roughly that again in 2013. The current reforms to the one-parent family payment aim to prevent long-term dependence on social welfare support and facilitate financial independence among lone parents, recognise parental choice with regard to the care of young children, but with the expectation that parents will not remain outside of the labour force indefinitely, and include an expectation of participation in education, training and employment. The reform scheme will bring Ireland's support for lone parents in line with international provisions, where there's a general movement away from long-term and passive income support and towards helping people to have life chances and choices in relation to education, training, employment, with a view to financial independence for themselves and their children. I'm very conscious that the changes in the one-parent family scheme highlight the need for additional supports for lone parents who will be affected by these reforms. In particular, there would be a need for additional after-school care provision so as to assist former one-parent family recipients to make their transition into employment or into other activation supports. I announced with Minister Fitzgerald, funded by my department, a new scheme of over 6,000 after-school childcare places for low-income families and social welfare income support recipients who gain employment, who are going back to work, and who have children at primary school level. Officials from my department and the Department of Children and Youth Affairs and the Department of Education and Skills are currently working out the exact parameters of the scheme, which will be launched on a phased basis this year, commencing with the pilot, I'm told, in April of 2013.
Minister, I regret to say that, the content of your reply is quite meaningless when measured against what's happening on the ground. You will be aware, Minister, that on page 22 of the Programme for Government there's a statement, and I quote, "The elimination of poverty will be an objective of this government," unquote. You're also aware that one of the most vulnerable groups in relation to, in connection with risk of poverty are lone parents. And you will further be aware that the most obvious way for a lone parent to climb out of poverty is to get into work, is to get a job. Now, Minister, when you came to office, a lone parent who was going out to work could earn €163 per week without their lone parent's allowance being affected. Last year, you reduced that to 146.50, I think, and this year it's reduced, as I understand it, to 130. Now, could you explain to me how reducing the amount a lone parent can earn without their lone parent's allowance being affected, how that creates an incentive to actually go out to work?
Thank you, Deputy.
Could you also explain to me how the changes which are penalising lone parents who take up community employment schemes, how they will create an incentive for lone parents to go on a community employment scheme to try to better themselves?
Minister.
Well, again, our payments to lone parents compared internationally are extremely generous. And I think the Deputy probably agrees with me that when a parent is parenting on their own, it is desirable that, particularly after the child is well settled in school, that the parent, particularly if the parent is young, should be given every encouragement and support to get back into work, education and ultimately into employment so that they can become financially independent. In relation to the Deputy's references to the current income disregard, the amount of payment that a lone parent receives depends on their weekly income. For people with weekly means of less than €110 per week, so in other words, working and earning up to €110 per week, the full rate of the one-parent family will be paid. Earnings above this limit are assessed at 50%, up to a maximum of €425 per week. And people then whose earnings exceed €425 per week are no longer entitled to lone parents. Now, that in effect is again a very strong support to lone parents who go back to work, to give them an additional boost as they go back to work. And as the Deputy is aware, many people parenting on their own work on a part-time, reduced less than 20 hours basis because of their commitments in relation to family caring. And this is a very significant support in that regard.
Deputy O'D.
It may be a significant support and it may be a strong support, but the point I'm trying to make to the Minister is it's a weaker support than the support she found when she took over that job. I mean, you know, the Minister says we want to encourage lone parents to go to work. Now, if you say to a lone parent, if you go to work now, you'll be able to earn less without it affecting your lone parents' allowance than hitherto. That is creating a barrier. It is creating a disincentive to people who want to go out to work. Similarly with community welfare schemes. Now, there's another specific question I want to put to the Minister. The 4th of July of 2013 will be a day when the lone parents of Ireland will certainly not be celebrating, because that is the day where a change kicks in, where somebody who is a child over the age of 12 years, a lone parent who has a child over the age of 12 years, will no longer be entitled to lone parents' allowance. And that is coming down again in 2014. Now, did the Minister make a statement that before she'd impose any changes to lone parent provision, either by way of qualification or by way of income disregard, that she wouldn't do it, she wouldn't make these changes until such time as Ireland had a Scandinavian-type system of childcare? Is that true? And, you know, if it is, where's the Scandinavian system?
Minister,
well, first of all, the Deputy, I think, is just to correct what he has said. If somebody is on a lone parent payment which commenced before the 27th of April of 2011, on the 4th of July this year, the age threshold reduces, Deputy, to 17 years of age. Now, let me say, you seem, on behalf of Fianna Fáil, to want lone parents to sort of stay in a special category, whereas I have to say, Deputy, I see parents as parents. And I feel that all parents, whether they're in a formal marriage relationship or they're cohabiting or they're parenting alone, that we should have in this country parents and children. I think, that Fianna Fáil, has tended, or you're tending now, to categorise lone parents rather than actually looking, as other countries do, to enable lone parents, people parenting on their own, when their children have settled in school, to get back, particularly initially, into education and training, and thereafter into employment. And I'm sure, like you, down the years, you know many people who've been in the situation, and as their children grow up, people are extremely anxious to be able to get back to well-remunerated employment and to become financially independent, and as people often say, probably to you, but certainly to me, to be able to give up their book. Now, I want to see lone parents in this country becoming independent, and the billion plus that we spend helping our lone parents who are doing a great job of raising their children, helping them to get back over a period of time to full financial independence.
Next prior question is in the name of Deputy Angus O'Snithy, and I call on the Minister. Question number 84.
Under the Supplementary Welfare Allowance Scheme, the Department may make a single exceptional needs payment to help meet essential once-off and unforeseen expenditure which a person could not be reasonably expected to meet out of their weekly income. The Government has provided over £47 million for the scheme in 2013. Special needs payments are payable at the discretion of the officers administering the scheme, taking into account the requirements of the legislation and all the relevant circumstances of the case, in order to ensure that the payments target the people who most need the assistance of the Community Welfare Service. There is no automatic entitlement to a payment or predetermined amounts under the different categories for exceptional needs payments. The weekly social welfare payments should cover normal clothing needs. However, in exceptional circumstances, support is available for clothing under the special needs schemes. The Department has recently issued recommendations to officers administering the scheme, including guidance amount in relation to payments in respect of child and adult clothing. For 2013, the Department has recommended that only in unforeseen and exceptional circumstances should the payment of an allowance in respect of clothing be made, and recommends a maximum payment of €100 for adult clothing and €50 in respect of child clothing. The January 2013 Consumer Price Index indicates that the overall cost of clothing and footwear has fallen by over 36% in the last number of years. Persons who consider that they have an entitlement to a special needs payment should contact the local social welfare officers administering the scheme.
I have to interrupt the
and I've set out a table, Deputy, which I won't read into the record of the House, just showing what the total amount spent on adult and child clothing has been, the total amount spent on religious ceremonies, and the total amount spent in respect of prams and buggies and cots in the last 2 years, which may be helpful to you, and the average payments in respect of those amounts.
Margaret, Minister, and I know last year we had a long discussion in relation to this when the question came up about religious ceremonies, and that's not the reason why I have the question down. The reason I have the question down is that obviously the directive is now taking effect in the last month or two, and there are people, especially pensioners, who in the past would have availed of a payment once a year. Because there is a lie, if you want, in the statement that says that this should be, people should be able to reasonably, out of their social welfare payment, expected to pay for clothing, and whether it's 100 or kind of 150 or whatever the figure you came up with, given the cuts to various different elements of supports for pensioners in particular, that means that they have less disposable income from their pension, but also those who are dependent on social welfare. So can you indicate that community welfare officers will not enforce a blanket refusal for people who approach them in relation to clothing grants under the exceptional needs payment scheme, given the fact that fuel prices have gone up, that there's been cuts to fuel allowance, and that there's a whole range of other costs that have increased. But if there is this blanket ban, do you not agree that it will exclude some people from day-to-day life, because this is a social inclusion payment to ensure that people can dress at least comfortably, but hopefully in a fashion that they're not rag and bone men and women, given that they have depended on this payment on an ongoing basis. I don't have a major problem with a cut, because it is means tested, and the community welfare officer should be taking that into account.
This is question time, in fairness. Minister.
Well, as I said, Deputy, in relation to the community welfare officers, as you correctly said, they have discretion. But the community welfare officers themselves, since coming into the Department of Social Protection, have been working to, if you like, share data and collate how these payments are dealt with on a countrywide basis. And I think in our discussion last year, I told you I was very surprised to find that in some areas like Dublin, there was an average payment of something like 300 in relation to Holy Communion, whereas in other parts of the country such payments were not made. And of course you would know in the north of Ireland there's no such scheme at all. So these are special payments which are given to people in the context of special needs that they have, and the suggestions are that that would be in the region of €100 in relation to an adult and about €50 in relation to a child. That is partly in respect of clothing. That is partly in the context of there having been a very, very significant reduction in recent years, which I'm sure you're aware of, in the cost of clothing in shops and stores throughout this country. It's been in many ways quite remarkable. And the recommendations by people involved in the Community Welfare Service I've accepted. But that means that in relation to, for instance, specific cases of hardship, I think you will find that the staff in the Department of Social Protection are always prepared to give that full consideration, because in addition to these payments in relation to clothing, and we also pay in relation to situations like people who have difficulties in some cases with funeral costs. We pay in relation sometimes to when houses and so on are being kitted out. And it's a not inconsiderable total spend of 47 million, which I think you will agree is a very significant amount of money.
Minister.
And it's interesting that other jurisdictions, including where you're in government yourself in the north, don't even have a scheme like this at all. But people pay for it out of their much lesser social welfare payment that applies in the United Kingdom and the north of Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy. Somebody briefly.
Just briefly, Minister, the changes that you have mentioned, what the effect on the ground is that there's now a blanket refusal by the community welfare officers, not just kind of that they can take into account and their means tested. And the situation north and south is not comparable in any stretch, and it's a pity that every time you speak or answer me that you try and distort the position. We're dealing with questions that are here and now. Can you guarantee that 47 million will be ring-fenced for the exceptional needs payments for this year, so as to ensure not just those who are looking for clothing grants, but for other help, given the effects of all of the other cuts on these people's lives, that they will have some recourse to some saving that will help them get out of the hole that you and the previous government have put them in?
Well, I gave you the amount that's provided for in the estimate, which is 47 million. I will say to you again that that's a very significant amount, and that this year and last year in relation to clothing, I think somewhere around in 2011, 49,000 people got assistance in relation to clothing, and last year in 2012, 51,914 people got assistance. So I don't actually fully understand, but maybe you'd give me the details of why you are suggesting that there's no provision at all now, because there's a provision in the estimates of 47 million. I just think it's important that deputies like yourself would appreciate we are borrowing money to pay for social protection, and we do that because it's important for our citizens. But it's equally important that those who are borrowing, who are lending to us, which includes the United Kingdom, they make the point in relation to payments like this that they don't pay that at all, and their actual social welfare payments are well below the level at which we make social welfare payments. And I don't think they make any provision in relation to this particular heading at all. I haven't even mentioned to you the significant amount as well that my department also spends in the exceptional cases of flooding. That's not included in that figure, but in those cases we renew clothing, bedding, household goods and other things which have been destroyed through flooding. And that's something else that our community welfare service officers deal with. And certainly your suggestion, which I think you're making, that community welfare officers no longer make any payments. I mean, the evidence here is 51,000 last year for clothing and footwear, and 49,000 the previous year. So I really don't understand where your suggestion is coming from, to quote you, that on the ground the payments have stopped.
Thank you,
I'm sorry, that's not true, and the statistics show.
On to other questions. And sorry,
they're the figures for last.
We're on other questions. On other questions now. I'm saying to everybody, we're on other questions. Number 85, Deputy Jerry Adams, and I call on the Minister.
I propose to answer questions number 85 and 99 together.
85, 99.
Thank you, Alaska Corla. Research evidence shows that early and prolonged periods of unemployment during a person's lifetime can have a permanent scarring effect on that person's capacity to improve their standard of living. This is a particular problem during an economic downturn, as young people tend to suffer the impact of job losses more than any other age group. It's estimated that about 7.5 million young people are neither in education, training or employment. This group of people are often referred to as the NEETs group, the people not in education, training or employment across the EU. This is therefore an issue that needs urgent and concerted attention at EU level, and it's an issue that the Irish Government identified as a core agenda item for the Irish EU presidency. Under my chairmanship, the Council of Employment, Social Policy, Health and Consumer Affairs Ministers, called EPSCO, last Thursday, agreed a recommendation on an EU-wide youth guarantee. The EPSCO recommendation is that each Member State should ensure that young people receive a quality offer of employment and continued education, an apprenticeship or traineeship within 4 months of becoming unemployed and subject to registering with the unemployment services in their country. The recommendation will now move to be considered for the formal adoption by the Council at a later stage in Ireland's presidency, most likely in May. And it encourages Member States to implement the provisions as soon as possible once it's formally adopted. It's also recognised that implementation will need to be more gradual in countries with higher levels of youth unemployment and particularly severe budgetary problems. In anticipation of the formal adoption of the recommendation, the Government will review the current range of youth employment and training policies in Ireland to assess what measures will need to be taken to commence the gradual implementation of the guarantee. And I can say as well that in the budgetary negotiations, a budget heading of £6 billion over the lifetime of the multi-annual financial framework has been set aside, the first time it's been done for this specific heading. And that in itself, although not as much money as I would like to see, that is actually a progressive step. So hopefully this framework pathway for young people to get education, training and ultimately into employment, it will be the beginning of a sustained downward movement in youth unemployment as the economy recovers. Even so, the implementation of a guarantee will certainly require an expansion of the range of opportunities currently on offer to young people in the form of further education, training, internships, subsidised private sector recruitment and supports for self-employment. In this regard, this state already provides a significant number of places which are available to young people, and the Department of Social Protection took steps in budget of 2013 to increase funding and places for schemes such as JobBridge, Community Employment TUS, and a new state employment scheme in the local local government sector. In total, an additional 10,000 places will be provided, and the Department of Education has made provision in the new Momentum programme, which is providing 6,500 new training places, many of which I hope will be taken up by young people. And a new recruitment incentive, Jobs Plus, is also being developed by my department. It was approved by the government as part of the Action Plan for Jobs. This incentive will cover the cost of the employer's contribution to social welfare. That currently is for an 18-month period. That period will be extended.
Margaret, Minister, I welcome the proposal. It's a pity that the EU haven't had the urgency to date to deal with this issue, but maybe better late than never. I want to find out a bit more about the specifics, because one of the problems with often these announcements is that there's a guarantee, and you said quality, but we don't have the specifics. So can you guarantee that these are jobs or training opportunities of quality, that they're not yellow pack jobs, that there's no displacement of existing jobs involved, that in the case of training, that in fact there is proper training, unlike, for instance, in TUS, where the state doesn't provide any training, where if the person is lucky, the jobs that they're placed with manage to give those people training during the year. And what happens at the end is this guarantee that we will place you for 6 months,